John Thune is elected as Senate Majority Leader via secret ballot. Trump's unconventional Secretary of Defense pick sends shockwaves through the internet. And a fired FEMA supervisor says that she has proof the agency neglects Trump supporters while distributing aid. So we have those stories and so much more. Blaze News Tonight starts right now. Welcome to the chaos. I'm Jill Savage. Today is Wednesday, November 13th. There's so much news going on today. Earlier today, the Senate picked John Thune as their majority leader over John Cornyn and Rick Scott. And in a statement after the vote, Thune said that this Republican team is united behind President Trump's agenda. And of course, there have been other selections today. Apparently, Matt Gaetz is going to be the pick for Attorney General. So here to discuss all of the things that are happening today is Matthew Peterson. He's the editor-in-chief for Blaze News, and Clint Brown. He's the president of American Path. So, Clint, let's start just with your assessment of Matt Gaetz and the Attorney General pick. I think that's the thing that everybody has kind of been talking about from the afternoon on.
Yes, it's been sending shockwaves through D.C. There are a lot of swamp creatures running scared right now. The question on everybody's mind is whether he can get confirmed in the Senate. Now, the margins are pretty good for Republicans for the first time in a long time. There are 53 Senate Republicans. That means that if once J.D. Vance is sworn in, Matt Gaetz could lose 3 votes, J.D. Vance could break the tie and still win. So we'll see how that plays out. I hope he gets the vote count. I think he'll be a fantastic Attorney General.
Yeah, so can you say just a little bit more about that before we move on to the Senate and the aftermath of the vote this morning? So when we look at Gaetz, I mean, a lot of people are going to say, oh my gosh, this doesn't have, he's a firebrand, right? Like his podcast was called. And he's, out there, MAGA, whatever. What do you think it signifies, though, about what the Trump administration wants to do right from the get-go?
Matt Gaetz has been a fantastic articulator of all of the hoaxes that have been executed against Trump. He knows the ins and outs of it. He served on Judiciary Committee in the House and put up really great fights against the Russia hoax, against a lot of the other things that have happened. So I think it symbols that they're going to clean house. They're going to clean house at DOJ. They're going to clean house at the FBI. This weaponization of government is over. Now, the left is going to scream and say that Matt Gaetz is going to abuse DOJ. Okay. Yeah. Merrick Garland didn't abuse DOJ. Jack Smith didn't abuse DOJ. We'll see. I think Matt Gaetz is going to clean up DOJ and restore it to how the American people want. That's the mandate that President Trump has.
Well, I love it. Chuck Todd came out on X earlier today and said these confirmation hearings might just save cable TV in the short run. Something that would not save cable TV, it's behind closed doors. John Thune has been elected as the Senate Majority Leader. What is your take on what happened there on the floor to get to Thune as the Senate Majority Leader?
So what happened here is there were 3 people running, as your viewers know, Rick Scott, John Cornyn, and John Thune. Behind the scenes, there was an effort to get some reforms in this negotiation. The Senate has not functioned well since McConnell took over, and since Harry Reid took over before him. These reforms were adopted by all 3 candidates. Just today, Punchbowl phrased it as, Thune committed to several modest reforms to the conference's operating structure, including pledging an open amendment process, as well as prioritizing appropriations bills for floor time. I'll translate that for you. It means bills are going to be negotiated on the Senate floor in front of the American public, and they're not going to be throwing up these massive spending bills at the last minute. Now, Thune could always back down from that. Circumstances could change, but that's the promise he had to make to get the seat. And to keep the seat, I think he knows he'll have to keep that promise.
Okay, so when I look at this, I just think not very long from now, it's not going to take long, we're going to be right into confirmation hearings, and the first tests are going to happen. And no matter what he says about, I'm MAGA, don't worry. Trump said, you got to let my people, let my people in, right? Right away, there's going to be pressure on him, and we're going to find out. Never mind the fact that in the next 2 years, presumably there's going to be, the administration knows they have 2 years to make good on their promises. And there's going to be an explosion of activity. And Trump is not going to be patient. He's going to be demanding, right, that Congress pass legislation. So when I look at this, I see it as we're going to find out very quickly, right, where Thune stands. And there's going to be, given what has happened in the last few days leading up to the vote, a lot of pressure on him. Is that right, or is that just even too optimistic? Maybe he doesn't care. It doesn't seem like McConnell cared. I don't know. You know this stuff. What will happen?
A few things will happen, Matt. First, any leader coming in right now is not going to have as much power as McConnell. McConnell didn't shut down the Senate in the way it operates. I won't get into the minutia until he had been leader of the conference for 6 years. And he also had a massive war chest behind him when he did that. Whoever's next, they don't have that kind of power. They're going to be susceptible to pressure. The conference has changed. They want something different. They heard the voters loud and clear. So that's the first point. And the second point is he will be tested, to your question, right away. And the test is actually whether he can resolve disagreement. Senators have their own prerogatives. They make decisions based on what's best for their state and their voters. Can he resolve disagreements about that? Fortunately, the Senate has a great process for resolving disagreements. You put a bill on the floor and you amend it until you get the votes to pass it, or you don't. And the same is true for nominees. You put them on the floor and you get the votes, or you don't. And then if you fail, you go back and try again with the same nominee until you get them confirmed. So it's just a question of whether he has the fortitude to persist in the face of obstacles, and a question of whether he can actually use the Senate, wield the power of the Senate to resolve disagreement.
Well, Clint, let's go rapid fire through some of Trump's other selections. He has Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy for DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency. What was your thought on when you heard that officially announced there for Trump?
Well, my thought was I was ecstatic. We not only get Elon Musk, we also get Vivek Ramaswamy. Are you kidding me? This is huge. This is what the voters wanted. This is what they saw from both of these guys on the stage throughout the campaign. I was particularly excited by something that many people didn't notice in that announcement, which said that DOGE was going to be working with and through the Office of Management and Budget. Now, that may sound so bureaucratic and unknown, but the Office of Management and Budget controls all the levers of the administration. That's where the money flows through. That's where the decisions are made before they go to the president's desk. That is the perfect place to house government efficiency. We're going to cut the budget. We're going to manage these people a whole lot better, maybe manage them out the door. So I was very excited to see that. I hope they bring in Trump's last OMB director, Russ Vought, who is a fantastic conservative and a real fighter for President Trump, to manage that along with DOGE. We'll see if that happens, but I'm rooting for that.
That would be amazing. Bringing Russ back, amazing. So one more, Marco Rubio, from Little Marco to Secretary of State. What do you say?
You know, he has a way with people, and that's what you want in your top diplomat. So I'm excited about that. I saw some statements today, and I fully agree with them, that Marco Rubio has evolved from someone who was a little bit more interventionist to recognizing the global landscape, the threats we're in, that the American people don't want boots on the ground in combat. You want somebody who recognizes that to be your top diplomat. So I'm pretty excited about Rubio. I think he has the experience with several years in the Senate, a couple of presidential campaigns under his belt. And he's been, people may not realize this, he's been ranking member on the Intelligence Committee, where he has all the insight about what's going on. I think he knows where the bodies are buried at the State Department. And we're going to find out, too, where those bodies are buried.
Well, Clint, it's been just a whirlwind of a week, and it's only Wednesday right now. So I can't wait to see how the rest of this week is going to shape up, because Matthew Peterson keeps smiling. He keeps laughing. There's so much going on right now. It kind of feels like an early Christmas around here. So thanks so much for joining us and for breaking all this down for us.
I'm not tired of winning, Clint. I'm not tired of winning.
No, you're not. You're absolutely not tired of winning. And it is nice to see a difference going on in Washington. Everybody's like, wow, he's picking some of these unconventional people. Yes, that was the point.
I mean, it's just remarkable to see the possibility of, really a frontier, like an open space where, no, you actually don't know who's going to be selected. Your categories don't matter anymore, because God forbid we live in a democracy where the president can just choose whoever he wants to take over this kind of stuff. That is just a breath of fresh air. And when you know something, and all of you do, everyone in the audience does, when you know something about how people in DC think, the category of Donald Trump could be reelected again, that didn't exist. It doesn't exist in the DC mind. So that's already a cratering, soul-rending sort of moment. And then when he starts picking people, Matt Gaetz, Attorney General, now it's time to run. What you got going on there is a sort of silence, and the only thing that you can hear right now in Washington, D.C. is the shredder and people throwing out documents and quietly moving boxes around and getting the hell out.
I was just going to say, if they haven't started packing moving boxes yet, they certainly will be later this weekend. When we come back, though, a fired FEMA official says that she's a scapegoat for bias against Trump supporters. We'll break it all down next. Turkey or ham, what do you want at Thanksgiving? Well, if you picked either one of them, you're wrong, because there's a third option, and that's free food. Free food is always the best. It's a free ham, though, from Good Ranchers, worth $110. It's their Thanksgiving special, so you get all 100% American meat, plus a free 10-pound spiral cut ham, all added for free. And by shopping from Good Ranchers, you're directly supporting local farms and ranches in the United States, and you can skip all of the chaos of the grocery store and celebrate what matters most to you this Thanksgiving, which is the time with the people that you love. So to claim your free Thanksgiving ham before they're gone, go to goodranchers.com and subscribe to any of their 100% wild caught seafood boxes or 100% American meat. And be sure to use my code Jill at checkout. And if you want that guaranteed by Thanksgiving, order by November 19th. So go get connected to American farms and ranches this November at goodranchers.com. Remember, visit goodranchers.com. Use my code Jill to claim this free Thanksgiving ham before they run out. If you're thankful for farms and ranchers of this country, go to goodranchers.com and support them with every order. Goodranchers.com. American meat delivered. Do you remember the FEMA story that came out last week where texts were leaked telling relief workers to skip over pro-Trump houses? Well, that text came from Marnie Washington, a FEMA field supervisor who's since been fired, and now she's speaking out. Washington says that she has proof that FEMA is lying and making her the scapegoat for their policy of avoiding hostile situations. Here's what she had to say.
We call a community trend. And unfortunately, it just so happened that the political hostility that was encountered by my team, and I was on 2 different teams during this deployment, they just so happened to have the Trump campaign signage. FEMA always preaches avoidance first and then de-escalation. So this is not isolated. This is a colossal event of avoidance, not just in the state of Florida, but you will find avoidance in the Carolinas.
Here to discuss is Rachel Bovard. She's the vice president of the Conservative Ship Partnership Institute. Rachel, is this problem bigger than just one employee at FEMA?
Well, I think that's the concern. And I think there's, we don't know, but I think there's a lot of evidence for the fact that this is the way the government has been operating for the last 4 years. They have taken direction from the president of the United States, who, stood in front of Independence Hall 2 years ago and said anyone who supports Donald Trump is an extremist. Well, every independent and current agency that works for him got the message. And all of the ideologues in the bureaucracy were activated to essentially make that statement by the president their government policy. And I honestly can't think of a worse example. I mean, we've seen, the examples have been littered across the last 4 years of the weaponization of government. But when you think about the mission that FEMA is supposed to represent, they are supposed to be there to help Americans at the worst point in their lives. And here we have that agency not just putting partisan politics ahead of it all, to say if you're expressing, your political beliefs or your political views, your political speech, you don't get access to the government resources that you paid for. It probably is just the tip of the spear, and it's actually nauseating to think about.
Yeah, this is maybe one of the greatest recent examples of how bad things have become. Let's talk about how to change them. There's a few things going on right now, and very curious to get your thoughts. What do you think about all these picks so far? Happening today, we have Matt Gaetz, Attorney General. Heads are exploding all over Washington, D.C. I'd love to know your thoughts on the picks so far, and then also any particular areas that you're really concerned with moving forward, some people you'd like to see in there.
Yeah, I was actually sitting in a meeting when my phone exploded, and it was over the Matt Gaetz pick. And I think, honestly, he is, I think institutional Washington is losing their minds, but I actually think he's the perfect answer to Merrick Garland. If you look at the person of Merrick Garland, the most active and aggressive and partisan attorney general we've ever seen, who turned the Department of Justice into an arm of the president's political terror, for lack of a better word, because he put Steve Bannon and Peter Navarro, two people who served in Trump's administration, in jail. He aggressively pursued peaceful pro-life protesters. He ignored the disorder in the streets and used taxpayer-funded resources to harass and prosecute and terrorize peaceful J6 protesters to the ends of the earth, essentially. He needs to be answered, and those actions need to be answered with a sledgehammer. And I really do kind of feel like Matt Gaetz is maybe the perfect person to do that. I think it's really exciting to see the Trump campaign moving as fast as they are to fill these spots. I think that was the concern, from the first Trump administration, where everything took a little bit longer. This time, they know the agencies are arrayed against them. They know they need strong hands in those agencies from the beginning, and they need people who are committed to the ideological project, committed to the president's agenda, and they're moving as fast as they can. I've been gratified by a lot of these picks. I think Tulsi Gabbard as the DNI is the pièce de résistance of maybe the latest announcements today. I am really curious kind of the agenda that's going to be laid forward at DHS. We've seen Kristi Noem get that pick. I think there's got to be a lot of attention focused on the speech bureaucracy in particular, that, disinformation complex that is essentially a guise for the government to essentially come in and shut down speech they don't like. That's an incredibly dangerous area of DHS that needs to be explored. So, the picks are great. Now I want to see what they're going to do and how they're going to do it.
Well, before Matt Gaetz becomes Attorney General, he will have to get confirmed by the Senate. And there's a lot of news out of the Senate today. They've picked a new majority leader in John Thune. And it's interesting that those two things, Rachel, happened on the same day, that you're going to have to look at that Senate now and where it's going to be heading. What does the pick of John Thune tell you about where the Senate does want to go?
Well, John Thune, I should point out, voted to confirm Merrick Garland. So there was a host of sitting Republican senators that actually voted to confirm Merrick Garland, including Mitch McConnell, John Thune, John Cornyn, Tom Tillis, Susan Collins. All of the people that you now see pearl-clutching about Matt Gaetz voted to confirm the most rabidly partisan attorney general in history. So maybe they have the vote for Matt Gaetz is to atone for their sins of confirming Merrick Garland. But that aside, to answer your actual question, I think John Thune in many ways represents an extension of the status quo in the Senate. But I will say he was not given an overarching mandate. He won this position by only 5 votes. And, I think Rick Scott's entry into the race forced the Senate to have some real conversations about conference governance, what they want to see in terms of process, the heavy hand that the leader has had over the last 18 years. And I think there's been a real rejection of that in some corners of the conference. And John Thune's going to have to answer to that now. Again, it wasn't simply an ascension. He really had to fight for this. And I think he heard from corners of the conference that are now going to hold him accountable to the reforms that they put out there, the reforms they want to see. And Rick Scott really deserves a lot of credit. He did lose on the first ballot, but he deserves a lot of credit for forcing those issues into this race and actually making these candidates talk to the conference. Because in previous years, the vote for leader has simply been a rubber stamp. It wasn't here. But I do think that this next Trump term is going to be interesting for Senate Republicans. They are the last group in Washington that's going to have to be dragged along into this new Republican Party.
Well, I mean, to what Jill's saying, they're going to be dragged along very quickly. So I think one thing that people are missing here is that this 2 years of acceleration starts now. There's an incredible amount of energy. You can see with these picks, there's a collision course coming. And we're going to see that collision first, it's going to be right in front of us in the Senate when it comes to these confirmation hearings. And we're going to find out real quick who's on what side. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are about that in terms of the Senate itself, because I find it very hard to believe that we're not going to find out that, it looks like Senator Thune isn't as supportive of MAGA as he's been saying he is now. And what happens then? Anything? I mean, what do you think?
Well, I think you're right. If they go through with these confirmation votes, right, there's a whole other strategy out there of should they be recess appointed? Should they do all these things? Right. If the Senate actually proceeds under the regular order and votes to confirm these nominees, which they can do, right, understand that the filibuster no longer exists for nominations. We have 53 Republican senators. You only need 51 votes to confirm these nominations. You have J.D. Vance in the chair. There's no reason any of these nominations could not move through the Senate if every Republican votes. So you will see very quickly who's on side and who's not. And, that's kind of up to the president at that point. How active a role is the president going to play in the Senate? How active a role is J.D. Vance going to play in the Senate? Because don't forget, the vice president is the president of the Senate. He has a constitutional role in the Senate. He's the only part of the executive branch that has an office in the legislature. And his role is not limited to breaking ties in the chair. He can sit in the chair and preside over the Senate. And he also was just a member of this body, right? He attended the Senate leadership vote, which I think is a very good sign because he is the president's ambassador to the Senate. So I think a lot of this is what role does Vance play? How aggressive is he shopping the president's agenda on Capitol Hill? And how prepared is Trump, I think, to basically go to the Senate and say, look, guys, what you saw the last 4 years needs an answer. I'm going to do it. Get in line or there's going to be some political ramifications, because I think that's what's going to happen as well. The president's head of the party, right? And I think that relationship has got to be established very quickly.
Yeah, it's an exciting time because it doesn't feel like politics as usual. Rachel, thanks so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thanks, guys.
When we come back, we'll have the election integrity wins and losses from last week coming up. One of the best parts of last week's election was not only that Donald Trump won, but that we got the results quicker when most people were still awake, at least for most states. So here to break down the election integrity wins of 2024 is Cleta Mitchell. She's a senior legal fellow at the Conservative Partnership Institute. So Cleta, we've talked to you several times leading up to the election. So now that it's over, what were some of the biggest wins for election integrity?
Well, I think that one of the biggest wins is that because of all the thousands of volunteers who've been working on various aspects of the election and the election system over the last 3.5 years, for some of the jurisdictions that had done some pretty questionable things in 2020, and they didn't do that in 2024. Fulton County, Georgia, it wasn't perfect. They they didn't follow the law in Georgia, and there are problems in Milwaukee. I mean, it's always the same old. But I think for the most part that two things happened. I think that President Trump kept talking on the campaign trail about too big to rig. I think that was really important. And, just some of the very horrible things that happened in 2020 with the Zuckerberg money and the turning of election offices using charitable donations from Mark Zuckerberg and his wife and their foundation, turning those election offices into Democrat turnout machines. That didn't happen. And I just think that some of the really bad things that happened in 2020 did not happen in 2024. But having said that, we sure still have a lot of work to do to get these election laws straightened out.
So if you were to just sum that up, I mean, how would you kind of grade looking back the election?
Well, I think it varies by jurisdiction. Every state's not equal, and I unfortunately can tell you the problems in each of the states. So, I would say maybe I would give it. Look, Florida manages to get a very large state with with very many votes. They're able to say pretty soon on election night what happened. Georgia's law was fixed by the legislature to a great degree. Still more to do. But Georgia had changed its statute. Remember how Joe Biden called it Jim Crow 2.0? And that the legislature required that the absentee ballots and the advanced voting returns, that those be tabulated and reported by 8 p.m. or within an hour after the polls close, whichever is later. And then they were able to get the election day results tabulated and initial results out by what was it, maybe midnight or so. But the point is that there's been a lot of work on state laws in different states, and things have changed for the better in a number of states. So I'd give it maybe, let's say I give some states an A minus and some states a B or B plus, but I give some other states, I'd still give it Arizona and Nevada. I give them a failing grade just because of the time that it takes and the massive numbers of ballots that are they go through practically a 2-week curing process or 1-week curing process. And I just think that people don't have any idea how many people touch an absentee ballot. If anybody realized that when they vote by mail, you knew how many people actually touch the ballot once it leaves the voter's hands, I think people would be a lot less likely. And we did have a lot fewer absentee ballots, vote by mail ballots this year in the states where voting in person is still allowed, because there are several states that don't have any polling places at all anymore. I think that's a mistake.
Yeah, I used to live in Oregon. They were one of the vote by mail only states, and it blew my mind that that was actually a thing in the United States. But Cleta, you posted an election integrity wish list on X. You said you want only citizens to vote, voter ID for all kinds of voting, ballots received by election day, period. Everybody could agree with that one. And eliminate all touchscreens, ballot marking devices, electronic voting, hand-marked paper ballots. So what are the odds that something like this would get implemented across the country?
Well, honestly, every one of these provisions are problems because of federal law. We always think that the elections are controlled by the states. But honestly, there are 3 federal statutes that have been on the books. Congress passed them. One of them, the National Voter Registration Act, passed in 31 years ago. Help America Vote Act passed 22 years ago. The UOCAVA, which is the overseas balloting, that was passed about 10 years ago. And all of those federal statutes are very problematic. So Congress broke the system, and Congress needs to fix it. So I'm working with people on the Hill now and with people from around the country to come forward and say, here's what we think needs to be done. Here are the problems we've identified. And honestly, most of the problems in the states, believe it or not, are caused by these federal statutes that really need to be modernized and updated. And Congress did it after the presidential election in 2000. Appropriated a lot of money to make them replace the punch cards and the old lever machines. It's time Congress did the same thing, get rid of those touchscreen machines, get rid of those ballot marking devices, make sure that people can see their ballot and mark their ballot and have the trust that how they voted is actually being read by the tabulators. So there are technologies out there, but man, we've got a lot of work to do to make our elections secure and where people can trust that their vote is being counted accurately.
So, I mean, just to really drill in here and highlight the point, I mean, these things are popular. Most people want a secure system. They're vital for the sake of what I keep hearing about the last few years, our sacred democracy. I mean, we can't have our form of government if we don't have secure elections. You have people from Elon Musk on out talking about it. So, I mean, do you have hope that this is fixed, that Congress will be able to move in the right direction? Because if it's not a priority, I know a lot of people who have said this privately. A lot of regular people out there will say, if they don't fix this, then, they're stupid. The Republicans are dumb, because this should be a number one. So what's your sense of the likelihood of it getting fixed?
Well, I think that I'm working on it. I've actually sent some suggestions. We're collecting suggestions from people around the country for what needs to be fixed in the federal laws. And I've been talking to the new speaker, or the speaker who just was reelected today. He was extremely influential and instrumental in helping us with the SAVE Act. Congressman Chip Roy and Mike Lee, Senator Mike Lee, I think both will be on board again to take the lead on a major overhaul. I really look at this as a once-in-a-generation opportunity to fix some problems caused by these federal laws. The reason our voter rolls are a mess everywhere is because of federal statutes. The reason we don't have protections to make sure that non-citizens are not registering and voting is because of a federal statute construed by the U.S. Supreme Court. The reason we don't have the right kind of voting systems that are secure is because states are not required to follow the federal statute that makes sure that whatever voting system is used is actually one that is secure and that the voters can see that their vote is what they intended it to be and that it is tabulated the way they intended for it to be. So, look, I mean, you're right. You're 100% right about something you just said. When you said Republicans are stupid if they don't fix this, all of these statutes that are so problematic are passed, they're instigated by the Democrats, and they've created all these problems. And out of chaos comes opportunities for fraud and manipulation. And we should not have big bunches of thousands of ballots being dropped at 4 a.m.
That's
like happened in
right.
Milwaukee.
That's
we
absolutely
should not have
right.
that.
And Cleta, you said it. It's a once in a lifetime opportunity. The Republicans are going to be busy at work. Thank you so much for all of the work that you've done and all the volunteers out there, because it has made a world of difference.
Thank you so much for having me. And I'll be back to keep you posted. We may need to get people engaged.
Absolutely. The midterms, they're not going to be too far off now. We're going to be talking about them before you know it. Thanks so much, Cleta.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
When we come back, we'll explain why Trump's pick for Secretary of Defense is making shockwaves online. Don't go anywhere. Donald Trump announced that he's nominating Army veteran Pete Hegseth for as Secretary of Defense to replace retired General Lloyd Austin. Now, this pick has sparked a lot of criticism from the left and the establishmentarians, as reporter Joe MacKinnon recently wrote in a piece for Blaze News. He's here to break it down for us, along with Jason Buttrill. He's a Marine and head researcher for the Glenn Beck Program. So, Joe, let's start with you, right? What is all the pushback? What have they been saying out there?
Well, after last week's landslide victory, elements of the federal caucusocracy realized that Trump meant business and he was going to execute what they're calling a purge. A great signal Tuesday was that he announced Hegseth to run the DOD, which just caused meltdowns among the usual suspects, but also a couple of the people deeper in the swamp. Now, I was saying to one of our editors earlier today that the establishment, the liberal regime, is postmodern in this. When they communicate, when they speak, they don't mean to convey facts or the truth. They mean to secure or acquire power. And so once you have that understanding in mind, you look at the responses from Adam Kinzinger and Rep. Adam Smith, all these individuals worried about the invisible hand of the military-industrial complex losing its musculature. When they attack Hegseth, and they have done so viciously, and executed lies of omission and just brazen falsehoods, ignoring his decorated military history, what they ultimately reveal is that they consider him a threat, and a threat to the bureaucracy, a threat to the status quo. And that's abundantly clear, not just from this pick, but from virtually all of Trump's new picks, including Gaetz this afternoon.
So this is an incredibly important and enormous job. I mean, the Department of Defense is an enormous monstrosity, some would say, Jason. I mean, it's hard for people to comprehend how big this apparatus is. And in walks this guy who they're saying, look, this guy's a talk show host. This is ridiculous. Your thoughts?
Well, I mean, I guess I would point to one of the experts that handled one of the first major military engagements of the Biden administration, Lloyd Austin, when he very skillfully conducted the Afghanistan withdrawal. Oh. You know, that was the expert action of all expert actions right there. You know, that's the establishment right there handed us a big win on that, ladies and gentlemen. That was great. Yeah. You're absolutely right. I don't even know if you can call it the Department of Defense now, because I mean, it is, but I mean, it's more like, you know, the military industrial complex has taken over the entire Department of Defense. And there are so many agents within that that have their own agenda. And it is infested. It is like a disease, all within the Department of Defense, the entire military industrial complex, that I do believe that it is time for a little bit of an unorthodox action to go on, to happen. I think Pete could be that guy. Can I say this, if I got some time here, is that I actually went through a kind of a range of a thought process when this came out. So normally when you have, Secretary of Defense, it's either someone like a general that is like a staff level officer, something like that. Pete is not that. He was a mid-level officer. His thing is not knowing massive movements of troops and how to plan for multiple different major regional wars within, the globe and how to handle that. That's not his thing. Now, normally, if it's not your thing, it's okay. They'll like supplement it, like, have you been like a major CEO, something like that? You have a proven track record for, managing 10,000 employees, something like that. Remember back in the day, McNamara, he was considered like, what are you picking him for? Now it's kind of a standard to pick someone like McNamara. You pick someone like a big CEO, something like that can handle a company. You can handle the company, the Department of Defense. But again, Pete is not that either. So what exactly is he? Well, he's a guy that has been very vocal on things that are fundamentally wrong with the defense industry in this company, or in this country. Well, it is basically a company. How do you fix that? Well, he's been huge off the top of that. You need to get rid of DEI. He's come right out and said, yes, he'll say the things that aren't considered popular, like women should not be in combat roles. Look, that's common freaking sense. That is common sense. There are certain things that a male soldier can do that a woman can't. I mean, it's just common sense. He will say those things. I think that I will say, so I had that first opinion, of my doubts. But then what I think is happening right now, what is the first thing that Lloyd Austin did when he took control? The very first thing he did was he stood the military down. Why? To root out all those dangerous white nationalists, Christian nationalists, supremacists out there. He stood the entire military down for that. Again, a fundamental problem. I think the very first thing is a counter to that. When Pete gets in, that's the very first thing he should do, is a counter to that. I wouldn't be surprised if he's not the Secretary of Defense for the entire, 4 years. That's not uncommon at all. Get in there, fix the fundamental problems with what's going on. He's talked about how he's asking questions. Like, we have currently a 10-year backlog on ammunition for the places that we depleted all of them, places like Ukraine. We don't have a solution for that. He's one of the only ones that's talking about fixing that. Those are the types of questions that we need to answer. We have problems like DEI, woke military, a depleted recruitment force. No one wants to join the military. I wouldn't send my son to join the military right now. I think that he will help address those. Those need to be addressed right now. And I think he can help with that. Yeah, definitely turn everything around before you get all the rest of the pieces in place, and you can put whoever else you want in there after Pete. But I see what you're saying there, Jason. The other big news of the day, Joe, is Matt Gaetz as Attorney General. That is the thing that everybody kind of has been talking about throughout the afternoon and evening. I want to get your take on what this news means for you.
Well, some have been discussing it as a troll cabinet, but I think it's something more. Last week, you had DOJ and FBI employees updating the resume as they expected big cuts, right? Even though Biden repealed the Schedule F executive order that Trump put out in late 2020, and they had a rule in April that would effectively shield bureaucrats from accountability. There's ways around it, meaning that Trump can laminate these agencies with pink slips. But someone like Gaetz, I think, signals a comeuppance, retribution. I believe there was someone, I don't want to misquote or misattribute, but an individual recommended that to make lawfare unthinkable, you had to go about ensuring mutually assured destruction. The only way to ensure Democrats will no longer hound their political opponents to try to throw them in jail, take them off the ballots, would be to go after them in kind. And I think Gaetz is the type of personality who might just do that.
Yeah, I think we should mention with Gaetz. I mean, I know it's blowing people's minds, and similar to Pete, right? It's like saying this guy, he doesn't have the normal Secretary of Defense, but Gaetz is not a dumb guy. This guy Gaetz is very sharp, and it does signal the same to me. I agree. I think this is about, no, we're going to come in and get you, and that's what you're saying. Right, Jason, about what would happen with the Department of Defense. So let me throw an objection to that, because I don't want to waste time with the objection of, oh, these guys are not experts and they're outsiders. Good, right? Great. What if this is a democracy where the civilian people rule? That'd be amazing, right? So that's fine, right? We're not going to go to those objections. But there is an objection from a lot of people who are, sharp observers, and they would say, look, the problem is, if you don't know where the bodies are buried in some of these large, monstrosities, these large, cargo ships that have been taken over by pirates, and you're going to go in and going to root all of them out, they're gonna run a number on you, because that's what bureaucrats do, and they'll eat you alive. What do you think about that objection?
Just the fact that, so say that again.
So the idea would be, if you don't have more knowledge or experience, a more traditional, knowledge or experience, you won't be able to get a handle on it. And actually, you'll be the naive bumpkin who comes in, and the bureaucrats will run one over on you.
Yeah, I'm fundamentally against this entire technocratic, expert-driven government. I am so done with it. What has it gotten us? Anything. And you know what? I mean, I remember there's, Reagan's famous Time for Choosing speech talked about, was so prophetic, even way back then. But he talked about this small intellectual elite in a far off land that knows how you should plan your lives, and they know better how that happens better than you do. That is total bullcrap. And clearly the pool that we've been choosing from are that small intellectual elite out there that feel like they know better than you do. We're completely sick of it. We're tired of it. No, I think that if I don't know some of these conversations that they're having, within the White House, but clearly one of the fundamental prime directives they've been given is, we are taking the barrel, throwing it out. This is a whole new barrel. And that is what we are picking our people from, completely to destroy that barrel, to shatter it. And we're doing it a different way. Really, the only way that you can do it, because it is so infested, like you talked about, Matt, is you have to have a completely different way of thinking. Now, it's not a completely different way of thinking what the Senate's doing right now, is it? It's not. Thune? No. That's the old way of thinking. I wish we could show that electoral map.
Yeah.
It shows that it's entirely red. You have a mandate right now to think this way. You can pick the people that you want to pick to do it a different way, because the country has said, do it, please, do it that way. Do it anything except the way it's been done. Not those dudes. Kick them out. Get some new guys. Let's do something different. You have the opportunity now. And then the Senate goes with Thune. I'm sorry, I'm going off on a tangent with him.
It's all good.
I'm just pissed. That's pissed at that.
They said you can do it a different way. What good is it the way that it's been done? It's gotten us here, to quote Jason Buttrill. We're going to take that energy, and we're going to come back and wrap up the show right after this. Stay with us. There are so many people being nominated this week. It's hard to keep up with them. But Matt Gaetz, as Attorney General, is definitely the one that has caught the most people's eye. And our colleague, Steve Deace, had gone to X this afternoon. And he said perhaps the most giant middle finger presidential appointment in American history. It's also headed for the Battle Royale confirmation hearing. Lots of D.C. people think that they have sordid stuff on Gaetz, so they can present it in an open forum, or he will be exonerated. Your thoughts?
Well, if they're wrong and they do bring out stuff against Gaetz and attack him, you can run, but you can't hide in this country anymore. I think they'd be very careful about that. It's interesting to me because the collective shriek, right, it's almost too much now. It is quiet there except for the sound of the shredders. And in this case, when they come after Gaetz, you better not miss on the way to that position, because this is a guy who is smart, who's accomplished, and who will dig until all the bodies are found. And he will not hesitate, right? I mean, this pick signals, oh no, we're going to get you.
Two things. Online, because this has been the most fun that we've had online in so long. People are like, I'm watching the nominations now, like the NFL draft. Mm-hmm. And then also somebody had posted on X, and Elon actually tweeted back at them and said, what is happening right now is young men in this country are becoming engaged. Yeah. They're aware of what's happening at the federal government. And Elon's like, yes, this was the plan. Yes. Right? And you can hear the excitement right now from us.
Is more, I'll tell you this, there is more a love of civic engagement or interest in that idea among younger men in their 20s now than there has been probably in my lifetime. It's not all of them, but the ones who are there going, wait a minute, I don't want to be ruled by people who are inferior to me, people who are terrible. I'm not going to let that happen anymore. And look, with the Gaetz pick too, we have to say this. Let's say Gaetz goes through and he doesn't get the nomination, right?
Yeah.
It's going to make Bill Paxton coming in look like a moderate.
Ken.
I mean, all the picks are good.
Yes.
All the picks are good.
Yes. Well, and again, not everybody's for it. Representative Max Miller said that Gaetz has a better shot at having dinner with Queen Elizabeth II, who is dead, than being confirmed by the Senate. That was his quote today.
Okay, great. Let's keep going. Let's go through the rest of the list. I'm fine with it. First, let's fight in the confirmation hearings and show the American people what this is all about. And then let's move on to the next candidate, because I don't think they're going to be bad. This is the most wonderful time of the year.
It's a whole new world. We can do all the songs. We can go anywhere. But I feel like the biggest thing is everybody has moved on from the George Bush Republicans. This is a whole new world that we're not going back.
Yeah. So what you can see this time around is that, look, Trump took over the Republican Party, and people, yes. The Republican Party was already dead. That's what we have to realize. The Republican Party was already dead. It had already killed itself. It had already run out of steam. Now
it
there's
just wasn't
new life.
aware of it yet.
Yes. But now, like Return of the Jedi, Return of the Trump, right now, vengeance, justice is coming, and also we're putting together something real that's a larger coalition that's not just going to be about taking vengeance, it's going to be about building something new.
I can't wait. I mean, let's go build. This is fun because we haven't had this much excitement, I think, in a Republican confirmation hearing in such a long time. This is going to be must-see TV as we continue on throughout all this. So be sure to subscribe to Blaze News Tonight so you don't miss any of the next nominations. And we'll be back to break them all down for you tomorrow night, because who knows what's going to happen tomorrow.
Most entertaining is most likely.
Yeah.